In Warhammer 40k, the founding of a brand new Space Marine chapter is something to be celebrated. This is usually a time of both celebration as well as dread, because something has warranted the founding of several new Space Marines. It is also supremely expensive, with not just the amount of time, effort, money and resources put into this, but not to mention the literal precious lifeblood of the Space Marine genome, the gene seed. Thus, when you consider there's a good chance that they may just outright die, or even worse, turn traitor, it's a very apprehensive and touchy subject to say the least. So then, what if we could change them a little bit? Make it so that they didn't succumb to the darkness of this galaxy, be it either physically or spiritually. What if we could make Space Marines, but better? And before you get typing on the keyboard, no, I'm not talking about the bloody Primaris. This happened before the Primaris. We're talking about the cursed founding, you sons of bitches. God damn it, wait until I finish the video before you start typing. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about the cursed founding. We're going to be going over its origins, what they tried to do, what they ended up doing, and all the various Space Marine chapters involved in it. But without any further ado, ladies and gents, let's get cracking on with today's video. So before I can get into talking about exactly what this is, I should probably explain a little bit of this stuff first. Such as, what on earth is a founding? Again, I assume most of you already know this, but on the off chance you just joined Warhammer today, welcome! Sorry that this is the first video you landed on, we're a little crazy here. I hope you like salamanders. A founding is essentially the birth of several new Space Marine chapters. Basically, something bad happens. Tyranid, Hive Invasion, Necron Tombworld awakens, whatever, big bad nonsense, yeah? And the High Lords of Terror come together and they think, we need more big armored men. So they decide to found several new chapters. Now, as to how many it depends. It's usually though a handful, maybe say less than 10 give or take. But there have been cases where it's significantly larger, such as the second founding, which is the breaking up of the Space Marine legions into many chapters. And that's right, you smart cookies, that would make the first founding the founding of the Space Marine legions way back when underneath the Emperor. And the latest founding is of course the Ultima founding, aka the Primaris founding, which created a bunch of more Space Marine chapters and revived a lot of dead ones. But what we're going to be talking about today is the 21st founding, also known as the Cursed founding. But why is it called the Cursed founding, you may be asking? That is because every single Space Marine who was born of that founding has either met a terrible gruesome end, has become traitors, or like the Lamenters, just has plumb bad luck. Now some of you may be asking, why? Why on earth did all this happen? And that is the great mystery of the Cursed founding. But we do have a theory or two floating around. You see, the idea of the Cursed founding goes all the way back to the original Legion of the Damned. This was back when the Legion of the Damned was still assumed to be born from the Flame Falcons, way back when in 1st edition Warhammer 40k. However, eventually as the Legion of the Damned story would change, that whole thing would shift a little bit to the Flame Falcons being part of the Legion of the Damned, but the Legion of the Damned being their own spooky ghost spectral Space Marine type nonsense. But essentially it boils down to this. A bunch of Adeptus Mechanicus boys looked at Space Marine genes and was like, you know, it'd be really cool if the Blood Angels didn't want to drink blood a la the Flesh Terrors, or it'd be really cool if the Space Wolves could not be the Space Wolves a la the Space Wolves. So what if we took this gene seed and tweaked it a little bit, made it a little better, aka interfering with the Emperor's work? Now, yes, I know everyone is going to be pointing and waving at the Primaris, but please understand, this lore existed far before Primaris, and this was before Guilliman was reintroduced. Guilliman being involved in introducing the Primaris story makes a massive chunk of difference, because he is a Primarch, and they can get away with a lot of bullshit. But as I said, this lore came before that, so don't point and scream at Primaris in the comments. But basically, interfering with gene seed, the Emperor's own gene seed crafted by his own hand, and mucking about with the Space Marine process is very heretical. Not only because 1, you're touching stuff that the Adeptus Adera doesn't want you touching, 2, you're messing with the Space Marines, who are notorious for their independence and lack of manners. Unless you're a salamander. Sally stay winning. But you see, the Adeptus Mechanicus boys in charge of this founding were actually part of an Inquisition faction, known as the Thorian faction. And the Thorian faction is a little extreme in their measures, and they're willing to take more risks than most, especially in the Inquisition. So they decided, what if we make Space Marines, but better? And it kinda went wrong, And I'm not talking about all their space marines ending up in a bad fate, but I'm talking about how the site that they were working in kinda got destroyed. It was pretty bad. But rather than me just regurgitating that, have it straight from the horse's mouth. Taken from Warhammer 40k, Index Astartes, number 2. 2. Inquisitor Belial. From Inquisitor Apollyon. Date 999.M41. Subject: Excavation of Adeptus Mechanicus Geno Lab. Thought for the day: strength through stability. Fellow Inquisitor, I contact you now with grave news. A matter has arisen on the world of Incunabla that may well threaten the delicate balance of the Imperium we strive to preserve. I have taken steps to remedy the situation, ordering a detachment of Grey Knights to the planet, but fear that events may have already progressed too far. I believe that our Thorian brothers in the Inquisition have once again attempted to make their wild and heretical beliefs a reality. Only time will tell whether I have acted in time. An agent of mine, inserted within the Adeptus Mechanicus some years ago, recently reported disturbing news from an archaeological site on the dead world of Incunabla. Details were slow in forthcoming, but it seemed clear that buried deep within the rock of this barren world were secrets that have lain undiscovered these last 5,000 years. Secrets regarding a founding of Adeptus Astartes Space Marines, sometimes referred to as the Cursed Founding. Having intercepted and examined the majority of the Adeptus Mechanicus astropathic transmissions, I believe that elimination of this site is the only viable option open to us. Such technology has no place in the Imperium if we are to preserve its stability. I present my findings to you and await further guidance. So in the Index Astartes, we get an awesome little bit, and that is essentially the origin of the Cursed Founding. And it's essentially a report, I guess you could say, broken up into different segments. Mainly, we get the point of view of the Adeptus Mechanicus leader, Explorator Magos Marco Patronus, and essentially it catalogs his roughly 40-odd days excavating this site. This site that used to be the founding of the Cursed Founding. Now, what exactly happened? Well, basically, these guys had produced all the chapters of the Cursed Founding, and they were going to produce more. However, when they were producing their latest batch, they realized that they started to mutate. They realized that the gene seed began to deteriorate. It began to destroy itself. Essentially, it's very similar to the plague that befell the 3rd Legion during the Great Crusade. Said plague that was only stopped by the intervention of actual Primarch DNA, aka Fulgrim. Basically, they realized, oh no, we have made Space Marines, but bad, not better. The rapid mutations, the crazy onset of stuff, basically, these were a ticking time bomb waiting to explode in a bout of furious and devastating biological mutations. Essentially, imagine a Thousand Suns flesh change. That's kinda pretty similar way to put it. But that is not what spelled doom for the world and its Adeptus Mechanicus boys. Well, you see, it turns out there would be an interdiction, led not by the Imperium, but by Chaos. A certain Chaos Marine, which I am very heavily believed to be none other than Fabius Bile, because it describes him having a backpack with so many limbs and appendages it made him look like a spider. Fabius Bile's thing is that he's a spider. Also, the project is called Novo Homos, or New Man Project. Fabius Bile, New Man, it makes sense. But basically, Chaos Marines show up and they ransack the place, killing everyone, taking everything. However, when the Explorator team discovers this, they realize that there's in fact one single specimen still left alive. And they decide, let's revive him. Cause the Adeptus Mechanicus may be smart, but that doesn't mean that they're wise. So they decide, you know what, okay, cool, we're gonna revive him. And they revive him, and we don't really know what happened after that. But we do know the fate of Incunabla. Taken again from Warhammer 40k, Index Astartes, number 2. To Inquisitor Belial from Inquisitor Apollyon. Date 999.M41. Subject: Excavation of Adeptus Mechanicus Genolab. Thought for the day: knowledge is dangerous. Guard it well. Since my last entry of the Adeptus Mechanicus research team, there have been no further transmissions from Incunabla, and all attempts to discover the true identity of Brother Liquara have met with failure. I can only hope that when the Grey Knights arrive, they are in time to prevent the sacred technology of this site from falling into the wrong hands, or that there are survivors left to interrogate. I shall, of course, keep you updated with my findings. Addendum to report. I regret to inform you that the archaeological site on Incunabla no longer exists. The Grey Knights secured the entrance and began exploration of the facility, but found no trace of the Adeptus Mechanicus team and no sign of their vessel. The site was as bereft of life as a world stripped by the Tyranids. There were no bodies discovered and no evidence of any attackers. Astropaths detected a residual warp trail, but were unable to discern its direction. I have had the site bombed from orbit with cyclonic torpedoes and expunged all record of it from all files. I fear that what was on this world is now gone, and we will rue the day that this cursed place was discovered anew. So we kind of understand what happened, but ultimately the end fate is up in the air. What on earth happened to the Adeptus Mechanicus research team? Well, in truth, we don't know, but I have a theory. They woke up a Space Marine. Space Marine did Space Marine things and probably just killed them all, and then took their ship and buggered off. Makes sense. I would like to actually see this continue like a book. We could do like a rogue Space Marine type thing, where he was never really a Space Marine, because he didn't go through the training or the indoctrination. And in the report it says these guys were only 1 year old. So these guys were literally biologically bred. It's not like these were kids that they just yonky splunkied and then made into a Space Marine. So he has no real reason to be considered a Space Marine, either by himself or by other Space Marines. He's just a guy. But that aside, we get a good idea as to what happened to the Curse founding. Basically, it boils down to this. The Adeptus Mechanicus boys messed with the Emperor's gene seed, and they missed incorrectly, meaning that a bunch of bullshit happened, a la mutations. And as we get into the various chapters that were effective, you realize that, yeah, pretty much all of them have some type of mutation. Except for the Lamenters, who just have bad luck and depression. Which, could be a mutation, but I'm willing to bet money that Tzeentch just being like, haha, fuck you, Sanguinius. Even though that's more of a Khorne thing. But Tzeentch would do that just to piss off Khorne, because Khorne would get mad, why is Tzeentch fucking with the Blood Angels? Khorne really is like a tsundere, isn't he? Do with that information what you will. But let us get looking into these various different chapters now, shall we? And ladies and gentlemen, we get lore from these guys taken from Warhammer 40k Codex Chapter Approved, 2004. Now this properly flushed them out, not only in both their lore, but it also gave them like some rules and stuff and conversion tips on how to convert them and use their rules in game, which is pretty sick. I like it. However, it's important to note there's one chapter that is absent from this, and that would be none other than the Blood Gorgons. Now these guys would actually get their own book, in which case we would learn a lot about them, and then GW decided they would like to add them to the Curse founding roster. Again, putting the whole thing up mutation, some turned traitor, some just died. So the Blood Gorgons would have served the Imperium for roughly 60 years. However, they would be declared excommunicate traitoris by the Imperium. Now this is probably due to the severe amount of mutations that they had caused by their defective gene seed, but in truth I don't really know. What I do know, however, is that the Imperium decided to send the Space Wolves to take over their world, because why not? This basically drove them into the Eye of Terror, because the Imperium didn't want them, nobody else wanted them, they had nowhere left to go, so they were slingshotted in there. From there they would land upon a Space Hulk, and they would devolve into several warring factions because everyone was very upsetty spaghetti and no one really wanted to be friends. That was until their chapter master, Gamadon, decided he was going to put shit together. So he joined them together and he was able to form a unified structure. And they decided that whilst they would be somewhat chaotic, they would not be servants to chaos, nor they be slaves. They are very much so a renegade chapter that dabbles in chaotic stuff. It's also stated that they are very logical and reasonable, like far more reasonable than you expect from a Chaos Space Marine. I kind of see them like the Ashen Claws a little bit, maybe a little bit more chaotic, but they're not afraid of chaos. Power is power, power is good, but they're very much a we're for ourselves and for no one else, which is pretty solid. I have not read their book. I've seen mixed opinions about it, but what I do like is their chapter culture. Their heraldry is supposedly a Medusa head, and it's like the Blood Gorgons. There's a lot of Greek theming to them as well. It's pretty cool. But let me know down below, did you guys listen to it? Do you guys like it? And what do you think about it? But as I mentioned, their chapter culture was very fleshed out. There was also something called blood bonding. Essentially, two Space Marines would come together and they would become bond brothers through a very intricate chaotic blood ritual involving the exchanging of organs, blood, tissue, and other like lovely bits. Now this is very dangerous because involving corn, blood, and demons, yeah, you're kind of asking for some trouble. But if it worked, they would be stronger not only in spirit, but also literally physically stronger. Again, chaotic demonic magic and all that. In my research though, some people have questioned the canonicity of this because they were involved in the Bastion Wars. And apparently there's some IRL stuff going on. I don't really know much about it myself. It could just be a rumor, I heard it, I thought I mentioned it, but yeah, definitely take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, yeah? But that's the Blood Gorgons. Pretty short in them, not really much to say. Again, they have a whole book, so I didn't read it, I can't really talk about it, but hey, they look fucking cool though. Like, they're on the cover of that Chaos Marine Codex and they just look beautiful. That is wonderful. God, red and brass are such good colors. But from the Blood Gorgons, let's talk about our first ever curse founding chapter and what may be salamanders? Let's take a look at the Black Dragons. Taken from Warhammer 40k, Codex Chapter Approved 2004. One of the many zygotes neophytes are implanted with is the osmodula. This small organ has a complex function within the body of a space marine. It monitors and secretes hormones affecting epithelial fusion and ossification of the skeleton, while at the same time, engineered hormones encourage the forming of bones to absorb ceramic-based chemicals administered in the marine's diet. 2 years following implantation, the long bones will have strengthened considerably, and there will have been a general increase in the size of the recipient's skeleton. Extreme ossification of the chest cavity, caused by growth of ribs, forming a solid mass of interlaced bone plates, provides a space marine with an armored layer to protect his secondary heart and lungs. But the osmodula zygote of the Black Dragons functions in an abnormal way, causing the growth of bony crests on the head and blade-like protuberances from the forearm and elbow. Like the Death Company of the Blood Angels, warriors afflicted with such abnormal developments are formed into separate fighting units, known as Dragon Claws. They sharpen these additional protrusions to a killing edge and sheath them in adamantium to turn them into deadly close combat weapons. This strains the tolerance of the Inquisition, and there are many recorded instances of other Space Marine chapters, notably the Dark Angels and Marines Malevolent, refusing to fight alongside them. It is even rumored that the Black Dragon apothecaries deliberately encourage such growths, even going so far as to knowingly implant abhorrent zygotes into some initiates. This is exceptionally dangerous, and the practice forbidden by Imperial Edict. But the old traditions die hard, as the ferocity of the Dragon Claws is much valued by the chapter master. Each chapter is required to send 5% of its genetic material to the Adeptus Mechanicus on Mars. This tithe serves two purposes: enabling the Adeptus Mechanicus to monitor the health of each Space Marine chapter and store a gene seed with a view to founding new chapters. The Adeptus Mechanicus has on several occasions threatened the Black Dragons with military action unless it complies with this decree, and even when the chapter has submitted genetic data, its veracity has often been considered suspect, as each sample has passed the most stringent genetic purity checks without fail. Without being able to prove anything, many adepts believe that the Black Dragons submit genetic material culled from other sources. How this can be possible is unknown, and the Adeptus Mechanicus is eager to fully investigate the medical practices with the Black Dragons. Ah yes, the Black Dragons. Now, there's been a fair bit of misconception about the Black Dragons. Because of their bad reputation, some people think that they're just dicks. This is both in-universe and out-of-universe. That's only because of their main interaction with the Salamanders, that being in Nick Kime's novel Rebirth, where a group of renegade Black Dragons are pretty unfriendly towards the Sallies. and they do a lot of very unfriendly stuff, like boarding their ship, killing a bunch of their dudes, etc, so on and so forth. But it's very important to note, these are a technical renegade bunch, they're not exactly approved by the chapter, and other than that, the Black Dragons haven't really done anything super evil. And again, that novel is a little interesting because it was never finished, and we didn't really get any more of that storyline, so it's kind of just left up in the air. It's one of those things where GW didn't finish it, but they're not going to finish it, so we don't know. Me personally, I like to believe that that novel is not representative of the Black Dragons as a whole, because, well, the Black Dragons are pretty cool, and I like them, and I like the idea that they're a Salamander's successor. As to them being Salamander's successors, that's never really been confirmed in any scenario. So yeah, it's a little iffy in that regard. But regardless of whether these are Vulcan sons or not, I really do like them as a chapter, because I like dragons. I also like how they embrace their mutations, and these are mutations that don't necessarily affect them too much. Well, they can. You see, they have a type of brother known as the Abomination. Essentially, imagine them like the Death Company for the Blood Angels, or those chained in the Tower of Amaro. Basically, absolutely abominations, very effective in combat, but not at all Space Marines in any way, shape or form, mentally, physically, or spiritually. But I do like how that even the brothers who don't have these mutations often fashion their armor to look like them. So they'll have melee weapons that look like the dragon's claws, their helmets will often be adorned with like horns, and they look really cool. And again, they're pretty solid chapter, despite the Inquisition trying to get them again and again. They're effective, royal, and pretty good. So, for the Black Dragons, I like them. They get a 10 out of 10 on looks alone, and I really hope that they're Vulcan sons. We're probably never going to get any new lore for them. I'd be very surprised if we did, but honestly, I like them. I've said that a lot, but I like dragons. I like them. They're cool. But as to what these guys are doing, yeah, they're still loyal and kicking about, and despite the Inquisition trying to nab them here and there, they're still pretty solid. But from one chapter who's in the crosshairs of the Adeptus Terra, we go to another chapter who is very much the servants of the Adeptus Terra. Let's talk about the Minotaurs next. The Minotaurs are a chapter that operate largely within the structure of the Imperial war machine, although the Inquisition and the Ecclesiarchy have on numerous occasions attempted to investigate them. The Minotaurs, like all Space Marine chapters, are an autonomous organization, and will therefore only answer a call to arms on their own terms. On many occasions, the Minotaurs have responded to a besieged world's plea for aid faster than other forces, engaging the enemy in a massive frontal assault, and then withdrawing when other chapters would consolidate their position in order to meet a counterattack. It has been stated by several Imperial commanders that the Minotaurs are unreliable and unpredictable force, that they would prefer to avoid altogether in preference to more tactically balanced, if less assault-oriented allies. The Minotaurs' most famous action was the only one for which they have been officially recognized: their assault on the Lamenters fleet during the Badab Uprising. The Lamenters, thought also to be a 21st founding chapter, had sided with the rebel Astral Claws in the Uprising, and the Minotaurs vented their full fury on their wayward kin in a series of savage boarding actions that severely depleted the Lamenters' numbers and forced them to their eventual surrender. The Minotaurs. Not really much to say, you know the Minotaurs, I know the Minotaurs, but here we come to a very important part of the Cursed Founding. You see, many people believe that the Cursed Founding used traitor gene seed, and the Minotaurs are the first example of this, and when we have another example later on. But it is literally confirmed by the author of the Minotaurs that they were meant to be Iron Warriors, so yeah, it's one of those things that we know but we don't really know. But just like the Iron Warriors, these guys are brutal and dickish. But not dickish because they want to be dickish because they see an opportunity. They are opportunists. They will yonky sploinky and grab whatever they want. They will take anything that isn't nailed down and take the nailed stuff too, because we beat you into a pulp, we won, you lose, tough shit. The Bloodhounds of the Adeptus Terra are known for serving the High Lords, essentially being their own personal Space Marine chapter, being outfitted with some of the best gear that there is, and they're known for not playing nice. They're also known for being very direct in combat, with them fighting with a furious passion that could put even fire to shame. Hence why in the rule set they're given the Berserker keyword. As to what they're doing in the modern time, they have been reinforced with the Primaris Marines, and their allegiance to the High Lords has been reduced quite a bit, considering the old High Lords tried to coup Guilliman, very bad idea mind you, And Mr. O'Gilladad took those boys, gave them the double barrel treatment in the back, and gave the Minotaurs a little spank on the wrist and said, "Stop being dumb." The Minotaurs agreed, and lo and behold, they're doing the God Emperor's work. Again, pretty short on this one, but I've talked about the Minotaurs here and there, and other people have talked about the Minotaurs here and there, so check out one of my videos or one of my mates' videos. Plenty of lore about these guys. But if you are like Greek Iron Warriors that are technically loyal, but no one fucking likes them, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Minotaurs for you. Plain and simple. Now, next up, we have the Firehawks chapter. Now, I'm not going to read the excerpt from this because this is back when the Firehawks were said to turn into the Legion of the Damned rather than just being a part of the Legion of the Damned, but I will explain that a little bit. You see, way back when the Legion of the Damned, when they were first existed, were created as essentially a warning for the warp. Basically, their original story was the Firehawks traveling the warp, but they got infected with some type of warp disease. So when they came back out, they were still flesh and blood space marines, but they were slowly dying of a disease. Thus, they decided that they would become a Legion of the Damned, hence the name. But eventually, as the Legion of the Damned story would progress, they would eventually become what they are in their modern day incarnation, warp demons of the Emperor, and essentially all of the damned spirits of space marines who suffered throughout the heresy by traitor hands or by modern day would go to join this Legion of Damned Space Marines, apparently led by a headless giant, Ferris Manus, and Firehawks would just be a part of it. Similar story, they served the Imperium loyally, they got lost in the warp, and eventually they would slowly die out. But then they would be recovered and inducted into the Legion of the Damned as Ghost Space Marines. That is pretty much what happened. I probably got one or two things wrong, but the lore is a little messy in translating from it, but that's basically it. So in this chapter, approved, they're treated like the Legion of the Damned, and you get Legion of the Damned rules. I have a whole video covering the origins of the Legion of the Damned and their transition throughout the entirety of Warhammer 40k lore, so go and check that out. God, I am not really talking too much about these guys because, God, I am not really talking too much about these guys, am I? Well, that's because most of them don't really have too much lore, the lore has been covered a lot. And you know, I don't want to regurgitate lore. I've been guilty of that in the past, of repeating myself time and time again, and I don't really want to do that, but I'm sure that the next chapter we cover has a lot of lore, but lore that no one knows about. Pretty small chapter, no one loves them, I'm sure about it. It'll be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. Well, shit. It has been speculated by some Imperial scholars that the inception of the Lamenters was an attempt to utilize the sanguineous strain of gene seed, breeding out the deficiencies known to mar the otherwise superior DNA. If such an experiment did in fact take place, then its primary objective seems to have been achieved, in that the Lamenters adhere to a strictly codex formation, and the chapter does not field any death company. However, the Lamenters appear to have suffered from the most appalling twists of ill fortune and tragedy, and are undoubtedly stricken with a morose curse that is reflected in the bleeding heart and teardrop emblems adorning their power armor. Two major incidents in the Lamenters' history illustrate their continued bad luck. In the last decade of the 9th century of the 41st millennium, the Lamenters made the mistake of siding with the renegade Astral Claws chapter in the Badab Uprising. It was later found that it was not any notion of rebellion against the Imperium that brought the chapter's involvement in the uprising. Rather, they viewed the Imperial attack on the Astral Claws, whom the Lamenters crusaded alongside during the Serpentine Straits Wars, as a challenge to the sovereignty and independence of the whole Adeptus Astartes. In short, the Lamenters allowed their pride to dictate their actions, and those actions were ill-considered in the extreme. Following the Lamenters' involvement in the Badab Uprising, they were investigated and eventually granted the Emperor's forgiveness, subject to a 100-year-long penitent crusade. The chapter's ill luck followed them, however, as that crusade led straight into the jaws of High Fleet Kraken. Today, barely 3 companies of the Lamenters are at large in the galaxy, and it would seem their curse of sorrow and ill fortune follows them still. Ah yes, the Lamenters. Everyone's favorite sad little angel boys. For those of you who don't know, the Blood Angels aesthetic is heavily inspired by the tragic angelic figures taken from Renaissance era Italy, sculptures, paintings, etc. And if you want to talk about tragic angels, this is it right here. As I mentioned earlier, I think this is a case of Tzeentch being a dick because he just wants to be. Because while some others have mutations, some others just have bad decisions, the Lamenters just got bad luck. Also, their gene seed makes them depressed. Like, I don't know what to say here. I don't know why GW created this chapter, but everyone loves them because they're so sad. Look at them, my poor little baby. Why does this happen to you? The Lamenters are a fan favorite because they're a great chapter. They love each other and they love people and they love humans, but they just get shit on time and time again. Even in the latest years, it hasn't gotten that good. They recently deployed along the Blood Angels and the White Panthers, and they were starting to get back up in numbers thanks to the Primaris reinforcements. That was until they had to fight off a Tyranid invasion. They managed to kill the Tyranid Prime, aka the dude leading the whole invasion, at the cost of them suffering so incredibly bad casualties they're back down in the dumps again. And they're continuing their sad journey throughout the entirety of the Imperium. Again, I don't really know what to say about the Lamenters. They constantly end up in bad situations. Whether it be ending up on a Space Hulk that turns out is infested with not only demons but also gene stealers, or whether it be them saving a bunch of folks from the Orcs only for them to fall to the Black Rage, eventually deciding that they are all going to die together cause fuck the Greenskins. The tragic tale of the Lamenters is a dark comedy, to say the least. But regardless of how bad it may be, the Lamenters always have a place in our hearts, because goddammit, they really need to win. But from the Sons of Sanguinius to another fellows who have wings, but this time made of fire. Let's take a look at the Flame Falcons. Next to nothing is known of the Flame Falcons chapter, for they were declared excommunicate within a century of their inception. Initial combat trials involving the chapter were a resounding success, and they were put on active service on the Southern Rim, based on their new homeworld of Lathe. Their first engagements with the Orcs and Eldar pirates promised a great future for the chapter, as they were observed to be hardy and courageous, even for Space Marines. It was at the Battle of Ruffenberg's World that things began to go awry for the Flame Falcons. At the height of the battle, their largest engagement at that point, the First Company were observed to spontaneously immolate at the height of the fiercest fighting against the rebels. Fearing witchcraft, the chapter's commander reinforced the front line and sent for an Inquisitor who was accompanying the Imperial Army. When it was reported by the reinforcing Space Marines that the members of the First Company were not dead, but were in fact still fighting with renewed savagery, covered in flames, to which they themselves were immune, the commander declared it a miracle, a gift sent from the Emperor. The Inquisitor had a different opinion. Knowing that he could not assault the Flame Falcons immediately, he bided his time, witnessing the remainder of the chapter undergo the same change as the First Company. Upon the successful completion of the campaign, the Flame Falcons returned to Lathe in celebrant mood, convinced as they were that their unique ability was a manifestation of the Emperor's grace. Soon after, the Grey Knights at the Inquisition's behest assaulted Lathe, ruthlessly destroying the cursed chapter. It is thought that a small number of Flame Falcons escaped that day, but of their fate, nothing whatsoever is known. Now the Flame Falcons are a really bad case, because they didn't really do anything wrong. They burst into flames. I don't really think you can call that a mutation. How do you mutate fire? But as the excerpt says, there is very little to nothing known about them. And honestly, this is more of a ad for how bad the Inquisition is, because you get loyalist Space Marines doing loyalist things, and they're all fine and they think, hey, the Emperor made us immune to fire or demonic nonsense, whatever. It's cool. And the worst thing is, the Inquisitor waits for them to finish their campaign, doing the dirty work. And then he sends the Grey Knights to come home and to kick them off world, destroying the chapter utterly. And again, I'm like, there's no reason to do that. They're just on fire. They're just on fire. There's no sign of chaotic taint. They're just on fire. I don't understand. I mean, you got the Blood Angels and the Space Wolves. They do worse stuff than being on fire. Now, yes, you can make the argument those are first founding chapters, so they got a lot of clout, but still, just wiping out a whole Space Marine chapter because they're on fire? I don't know. I feel like this one is really underbaked compared to the other ones, because there's reasons here and there, but it just feels really unnecessary. I don't know, maybe I'm trying to apply logic to an illogical situation here. Let me know, what do you guys think down below? But it is known that they have at least one confirmed surviving member, that being Brother Garrick. He would eventually become a black shield in the Death Company, who served an Inquisitor no less. Lord Otto Dagover, and his story is detailed within the short story Vargo Fastness. And he actually gets a really cool spot because it turns out he is able to control it, which means that if the Inquisition didn't just jump the gun and kill everybody, they would have had a loyalist chapter of Space Marines that can burst into flames on command, because during the book, minor spoilers, they get attacked by a Necron Lord, and Garrick straight up just gives him a bear hug and implodes in fire. It's not enough to kill him, but it's enough to fuck him up so that the rest of the squad can kill him. But that's like, I really don't know. I don't know how to feel about this one. The Cursed Founding is pretty interesting, but this just feels wrong. I don't know. I'm not going to talk about this anymore because I'm just going to end up waffling on like I'm from bloody IHOP. I know they make pancakes, but whatever. Let me know down below, what do you guys think? But now we come to our last chapter, and one of my favorites, the Sons of Antaeus. The Sons of Antaeus are only officially recorded in one source, the Chronicles of the Third Latter Guild War of the Inca Sector, 850.M41 to 901.M41. The chapter is listed as having answered the pleas of the Guild Fathers for aid against pirate forces, sponsored by business rivals, and according to the records acquitted themselves courageously before departing. Since that time, a force matching their grey and black livery has been cited on a number of chapters in the Ultima Segmentum. These accounts have always made specific mention of the size and apparent hardiness of these mysterious Adeptus Astartes. They are reportedly capable of surviving hits from weapons that would slaughter other Space Marines. One such eyewitness account, submitted by Captain Rachman of the Subjugators chapter, records an incident in which his force found itself under attack by the Eldar of the Void Dragon's pirate fleet. Surrounded and under heavy fire by the pirates' ultra-rapid anti-grav vehicles, Rachman states that a force bearing the livery of the Sons of Antaeus appeared unexpectedly and attacked the enemy vehicles from behind. Forced to redeploy, the Eldar suddenly found themselves with the prospect of having to make a breakout. The Eldar Falcons and Wave Serpents made straight for the Sons of Antaeus, judging them the lesser of the two Space Marine forces. The incredulous Captain Rachman gives an amazing account of the Sons of Antaeus stand in the face of a storm of Eldar firepower, against which the mysterious Space Marines seemingly stood impervious. The subjugators were able to press their attack on the enemy rear, as the Sons of Antaeus held the Eldar in place, and the pirates were soon destroyed in short order, caught between the immovable anvil of the Sons and the irresistible hammer of the subjugators. I love these guys because they're tanky Space Marines. Their genetic defect is this: their structures, the skeletal structures, are said to be as hard as adamantium and significantly larger. Judging by this, I guess they're probably as big as salamanders maybe, or possibly even bigger. And again, we don't really have anything about them at all, kind of like the Flame Falcons in that case, which is super annoying because they're said to be as tough as Plague Marines, which makes sense because in the rules that they're given, they get +1 toughness, which is a big deal for Space Marines back then. Because remember, they only had 1 wound, so toughness really mattered. Plague Marines can take a hell of a lot of punishment, and the fact that these guys, as an infantry formation, can stand toe-to-toe with Eldar tanks, that's no small feat, even for a Space Marine. But we do have one example of a Son of Antaeus, that being Jern, who is a Space Marine who was also part of the same kill team as our Flame Falcon lad. And again, this story is pretty old, but it said that he was able to take multiple Gauss hits and be perfectly fine. It said that his whole body acted like a second suit of armor, like he was wearing 2 suits of powered armor. I don't know to the canonicity of this story anymore because that sounds fucking mental, but that's pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. It may be bullshit, but just because it's bullshit doesn't mean it's not cool. But yeah, I adore the Sons of Antaeus, I adore them. Also, for those of you wondering, Antaeus is a person of Greek/Berber mythology. Essentially a demigod who's incredibly durable and strong. Also, pretty good guy. Also, I love that they're named the Sons of Antaeus. Also, that means that the character of Antaeus has survived in mythology all the way to the year 40,000, which is really impressive when you consider the Emperor tried to wipe out all religion for like a 200-year period. But yeah, Sons of Antaeus are fucking cool, I love them, they're great. I don't have anything to say because there's literally nothing to say. Solid color scheme, excellent chapter doctrine, please give me a story about them in Terminators just killing a bunch of traitor guardsmen. That would make me very happy. And ladies and gentlemen, that does for the Cursed Founding. So the Cursed Founding is one of my favorite bits of lore. I know I say that a lot, but I really like 40k, okay? Give me a break. I am a happy guy, let me be happy. I know that a lot of people think that the Cursed Founding has been modded because of the Primaris, because the idea that Call could manipulate the gene seed, and because he's Call and he's super good, then they point back to this and like, well, this kind of just makes it a moot point then, because the whole point of this was don't fuck with the Emperor's work, but then Call did it anyway, so it's like, why even bother? And whilst it's true that, yeah, it does take away from it a little bit, I think saying that it makes the point moot is a bit short-sighted. I love this because it shows that even though you do everything right, the Imperium can be its own worst enemy. Because I know earlier in the intro when I said all these chapters led to bad fates, or they were hounded by the Inquisition, or they ended up traitor, but if you take a look at the bulk of them, they didn't really do anything wrong. Nothing bad really happened. The Imperium has such a negative view about these chapters. Yet, that's because they're the Imperium. In my opinion, the Cursed chapters are an excellent story that goes to show that the Imperium is so fearful of Space Marines going out of control that they will actively harm them rather than actually taking a look at the grand scale to find a proper solution. You know, the Blood Gorgons were driven off their home. They were declared excommunicate traitors. The Flame Falcons as well, they got absolutely annihilated by the Inquisition for basically no reason. The Sons of Antaeus are shunned because they have a defective gene seed, which literally makes them better at combat. Same thing with the Blood Dragons. The Inquisition has tried time and time to get them. Everyone hates the Minotaurs, and the only reason why the Inquisition can't bring the hammer on them is because they had the High Lord's backing. Again and again and again, you take a look at the Cursed Founding and you realize that, aside from the Lamenters who literally have Tzeentchian bad luck, all the bad that happened to these chapters was essentially caused by the Imperium. Yeah, they had problems of their own internally, but the Imperium just made it worse. So very much worse. Thus, I like this as a tale of, hey, the Imperium truly is its own worst enemy. Thus, exactly like I said, I love this as a tale of the Imperium is its own worst enemy, and how oftentimes it will forcibly push those who would be its allies, its protectors, and its defenders into roles, into areas, into places that they are forced to become their detractors, their assaulters, their enemies. But regardless of whether you view the Cursed Founding as something that was ruined by the Primaris, or like me, you think it still has a good bit to offer for the lore, the beautiful thing that we got are the Space Marines. The chapters of the Cursed Founding are the best part. They look amazing, their theming, their culture, they're all beautifully done. And they were created in an age where making your own Space Marines, making your own chapter, making your own rules, and everything in between was heavily encouraged, and something that has been lessened in recent years and a lot of people don't like. But the Cursed Founding to me is great. Not only from its lore, but also from the modeling standpoint and the rules standpoint. It's fantastic. And even if GW doesn't offer rules for these unique chapters anymore, you can always take a Primaris jump back intercessor and give them some bony bits. Because at the end of the day, they're your models. They're your minis. Paint them however you want. And embrace the lore of these beautifully cursed founding chapters. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for watching. Let me know down below what do you guys think about this episode. Do y'all like it? Do y'all dislike it? Do you guys think the Cursed Founding was been better? Do you think it was been lessened by the Primaris? And do you think it has its place? Would you, like me, like to see them essentially, not really updated, but I would love to see GW release another index of stories like the Cursed Founding in the modern day. Give us new stories for all these boys. I'd like it. But let me know what y'all think down below. And I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, but even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. But yeah, shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3 and Miss Majora of the Void. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Bowen, Mr. Sean IRL7, Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. Sergeant Cossack, 68W173D, and Mr. That Guy. Shout out to my corporate tier members, Mr. Tremail the Math Kitty, Lord Rosarius, Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Bowen, Shauna Smithers, The Gentle Salamander, The Wench of Warhammer, Major Doshinet, Edward King, and Mr. Overanalyze This. And finally, but absolutely not least, shout out to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan_SBW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Aeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Portus Unum, Mr. CMD Nay, Mr. Eric Massaro, Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken_Sakura333, Mr. Adrian Von Furen, Mr. Morally Bankrupt, Mr. Matthew Peter, Mr. Josh Lee 1320, Mr. Adrex X1, Mr. Ethan Elam U71, Mr. Kiri Khan, Mr. Malpace-XB1XE, and Mr. Robert Makorovich. Thank you, I love you, I appreciate you guys. Someday our memberships get a bunch of awesome benefits behind the scenes stuff, early access to these videos, but you get to help out your boy and you get my love and support. But remember, this will always be free, so whether you give your boy $1 or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101, you've been the beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you so very much for watching. I must just say hello there, boys and gals, and I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. Space Marines are cool, that is all.